It's time! Stop the FOMO! Do you ever fear of missing out on the best OLED TV that LG has ever made? We're talking about the LG G3, its flagship 4K TV for 2023. Today, we're going to review the LG G3 equipped with the all-new miniLED technology, micro lens array. Now you're asking, wait, why did LG implement this all-new amazing technology for OLED TV? Quite simply, survival. After last year's blistering defeat at the hands of Samsung's qd-oled technology, LG had to do something to up its game. By the end of this video, you will know everything you need to know about the picture quality of the G3 and whether it fits your use case or whether you should consider the Samsung S95C. But if I was to bring home a TV for my family, which one would it be? Now before we get there, check out this fun home theater upgrade I just installed on my G3, and it will breathe new life into your older TVs. This video is sponsored by Govee and its T2 backlighting system for your TV. Look at how everything improves after you use this dynamic backlighting system. The T2 is the first color matching backlight that uses dual cameras with 40% more color accuracy than the Govee T1. So the camera sits on top of your TV and then analyzes the color of the content, extending the immersiveness of your TV. So a 55 or 65-inch TV feels a lot bigger. It also has a convenient smartphone app. Watching movies on the G3 with the T2 backlight system definitely makes a difference. As good as it already is, this expands the viewing immersion. With better color matching technology than its competitors, the Govee T2 is compatible with 99% of TVs and gaming monitors on the market. The Govee T2 is an affordable home theater upgrade that makes your TV feel bigger. Check it out by clicking on the Govee link in the video description below. No, the Sony A95L is not yet available. It won't be released until much later in the summer, but in this video we will talk about what Sony needs to do to keep up or maybe beat the G3 and the S95C, some observations that maybe Sony could learn from. So after weeks of living and breathing with the S95C and the LG G3, including a 2-day marathon of live streaming before calibration, after calibration, you can check it over here, I am so familiar with both the G3, the S95C, their strengths and weaknesses, and most importantly, hopefully I can share some of these insights with you when you're considering, well, which to get, since they are so similar. But before we get to those comparisons, let's get one thing out of the way first. Should you even consider the G2 over the G3? Generally speaking, the G3 is definitely an improvement in many ways that many of you were counting on. Not only is it obviously brighter in both specular highlights and APL, average picture level, but most importantly for me, the 65-inch size has definitely improved uniformity, banding issues, and the pink tint is much less noticeable. Not completely eliminated, but these improvements are huge because for the last several years, these have been ongoing issues for LG on the C series and the G series. Now it won't affect image quality as much as before because in real content, I did not notice those issues. The G3's true competitor is the Samsung S95C. They're both priced identical at launch. 77-inch, $4,500, 65-inch, $3,300, and the 55-inch is $2,500. To the penny, they are identical. So, since pricing between the G3 and the S95C are identical, deciding which one is all in the details. We're talking about sports, bright room, dark room, movies, specific scenes. Your content will determine which TV may be a better fit for you. In other words, it's your use case. So my verdict will be broken into different use cases. At the end, we'll summarize it, but we're going to break it down little by little so you have an idea of how I came to that conclusion at the end of this video. Beginning with accuracy, both are excellent out of the box, and after calibration, nearly identical. If you don't plan to pay for a professional calibration, both are fine. They don't need major help like a typical high sensor TCL may need a lot of tweaking. The G3 and the S95C, great out of the box, with the exception that the G3 is closer to accurate with HGIG gaming content. Both watching Netflix and anything that's HDR10, perfect. Now, non-HDR10, we're talking Dolby Vision or HDR10 Plus, that's where they diverge. The G3 has Dolby Vision. The Samsung S95C does not, but it has HDR10 Plus. The G3 does not. We cannot finish this discussion without talking about Dolby Vision. Many of you are saying the G3 because it has Dolby Vision and are discounting the S95C because it doesn't have it, or vice versa. HDR10 Plus on the S95C and Dolby Vision doesn't have it. So let's set the record straight when it comes to HDR10, Dolby Vision, HDR10 Plus. HDR10, all these TVs are capable of, right? Static metadata, that's the standard format, it's free, it's out there. Most of these modern TVs are capable of decoding HDR10. Then you have Dolby Vision, the supposed premium format, as well as HDR10 Plus. And many of you are making your decision that the G3 is the better TV simply for that reason. But let's get into why I think you may be wrong. If you are choosing the G3 because you believe Dolby Vision makes the image better, what do you mean by better? I will tell you this. Dolby Vision version of the same content in regular HDR10, the Dolby Vision version is less bright. The peak specular highlights are not as bright. The APL is slightly lower. It is a dimmer image. What I don't understand is many people are saying, well, HDR10 is inferior. Dolby Vision is better. It's capable of 10,000 nits and 12-bit this and all these things. But then when I ran the latest Spears and Munsell benchmark disc, 10,000 nit Dolby grade, and then I compared it with the 10,000 nit just regular HDR10 version, the Dolby version was less bright and it looked just like the 2,000, 1,000 nit version, barely brighter than that, whereas regular HDR10 scaled up with both TVs, the G3 and the S95C. As I fed it brighter HDR10 versions, both TVs showed brighter specular highlights, brighter and brighter. Dolby Vision on the G3, well, looked very similar to the 1000 nit version. In other words, what Dolby Vision is doing is pulling down the high performance capability of the TV so that all TVs look alike. That's unacceptable. You paid extra for the G3. Dolby Vision version is going to make it look more like the G2. What's the point? Now, let's talk about HDR10 Plus. On the S95C, it looks nearly identical to the HDR10 version. So although it's not as dim as Dolby Vision, but then it's not brighter or better than HDR10. Maybe barely, but it's not noticeable unless you have them next to each other, right? So at the end of the day, neither 10 Plus on the S95C nor Dolby Vision on the G3 should make a difference in your decision making. And many of you are saying, wait, I want a gaming TV that's capable of Dolby Vision gaming. That's a whole other ball of wax that I don't want to get into. But let's just say Dolby Vision gaming is another work in progress. I would not make the decision to buy the G3 based on Dolby Vision gaming. Just stick with HGIG. You know what you're going to get. You're not going to know what you're going to get with Dolby Vision gaming. Now, there are other reasons you might choose the G3, but Dolby Vision should not be one of them. Next up is brightness in general. The G3, if we're talking patterns, let's say a white widow pattern, 1%, 2%, whatever percent, when watching these measurements, keep in mind that due to the wide angle lens, the outside part of the image will always look slightly dimmer than the central part. So focus on the brightness comparisons as you get closer to the center where the LG G3 is. Did you see that? As the G3 gets closer and closer to full screen, its brightness load balancing system hits its limit and drops its brightness in a less linear manner than the S95C or the Sony A95K. You would think this would affect its sports SDR brightness full screen, right? Well, not so. This is why synthetic patterns are not always predictive of real-world content. So it looks like the G3 and S95C have similar bright white capabilities, both slightly brighter than the A95K. What about color? If you take color into consideration, the S95C, pure colors, yellow, green, blue, whatever, is slightly brighter. However, when the white and the colors combine into a movie, both really look identical. So let's go into these comparisons and you can see for yourself what I'm talking about. Beginning with the Spears & Munsell benchmark disc, LG G3 in the center, S95C on the left, Sony A95K on the right, beginning with the strength of the G3, which is bright white type scenes. And don't forget to ignore the drop off in brightness at the far edges. So when it comes to bright white, the G3 easily matches or sometimes exceeds the S95C. But what happens when you add color? This is where the G3 struggles a little bit against the S95C. This is HDR at 2000 nits. Now at 600 nits and 1000 nits, color saturation and brightness is identical, but pushing it at 2000 nits, the G3 definitely struggles. Specifically, the bright yellow abdomen becomes less saturated as it gets brighter. Made even more obvious when the eyes lose saturation at higher luminances. Here's a close-up of the G3 at 600 nits. Look at the yellow in the eyes. Jumping to 2000 nits, it gets brighter but immediately loses saturation. The color is lost. On the S95C, both brightness and color saturation remains. And no, Dolby Vision does not help. At 1000 nit Dolby Vision, both the G3 and A95K look very similar. Jump up to 10,000 nit Dolby Vision, and the G3 loses luminance while the A95K preserves that color saturation, even though brightness is similar. There is some color loss, and Dolby Vision did not help the G3 preserve it. Next up, Mad Max Fury Road, Mouth of the Cave, bright white scene. Yes, the G3 nails it, but in the infamous fire guitar scene, bright red-orange, falling just short of the S95C. Into the Sandstorm, all three TVs are fantastic, matching in peak brightness and specular highlights. That is until there's a pure color luminance involved, like this orange lightning bolt. But look how well it does against the A95K. Next up, Pan and the awesome setting sun scene. Now initially it looks like the S95C is brighter, but let's take a closer look. There's more to this detail, or lack thereof. As you can see, the S95C, when we lower the exposure, we notice that the G3 has better detail and the S95C lost a lot of that detail. What we need to do is bring contrast down from 50 on the S95C to around 42. Strangely enough, the specular detail is now better than the G3. With contrast around 41, 42, 43, brightness is preserved, but contrast is a little bit better. Could this be an issue with the MLA? When it's so bright, it lifts a little bit and you lose some of that contrast? Honestly, I don't know. It could just be the processing or color science, but it's something to keep in mind. Playing with dynamic tone mapping, expression enhancer, and the contrast setting did not help. The Suicide Squad is next, representing action, color, HDR, different highlights, dark scenes, bright scenes. This is such a great showcase for HDR. All three TVs look amazing. This is the kind of content most of you will be watching, and the reason I put this movie in is because, frankly, there's very little difference between the three of them. And this represents, I would say, 99% of what you're gonna see, with a few exceptions that we'll talk about next. Let's try streaming low bitrate content on YouTube TV. This is an HD 1080p feed of the masters. Look behind Rory McIlroy. The background, major macro blocking. On the Samsung S95C and the Sony A95K, the G3 is the cleanest, and by a long shot, it is better. Now we know the S95C doesn't have great processing of low bitrate content, but surprisingly, the Sony A95K, maybe this is why the A95L needs that new XR Clarity processor. So as you can see, LG G3 is the master of pure white brightness, if that's important to you, while the S95C is the master of pure color luminance, and we're not talking about BT2020 or wide color gamut, even in Rec 709, right? Pure yellow luminance in Rec 709 on the S95C can reach higher brightness than the G3 in that same pure color. But when you put it in a scene, a mixed scene, the two are very similar. Yes, there are minor differences. S95C will hit slightly brighter in those large windows where it's a mix of colors like yellow, orange, or whatever. The reality is 99% of content, whether streaming or Blu-ray disc or Kaleidescape, are not graded above 1000 nits. In that case, both TVs perform identically, and if you calibrate them both, they will be indistinguishable. when it comes to brightness, specular highlights, HDR impact. Now, what if you were to play with the settings, right? You have expression enhancer here, you have contrast enhancer, you have dynamic tone mapping, cinema home, and then over here you have filmmaker, active tone mapping, and you have contrast enhancer as well. Ultimately, if I was to push both TVs to its maximum brightness with all the different enhancements while preserving maximum color accuracy, you know what happens? Check it out. Using Aquaman, we're going to try to match tone mapping active on the S95C. The G3 in filmmaker mode, is there anything that will raise the brightness enough to equal the S95C? No. Dynamic tone mapping, expression enhancer, auto dynamic contrast, none of that helps because LG's filmmaker mode doesn't want to stray far from accuracy. You have to go into either cinema or cinema home to get that extra brightness punch from these enhancements. Almost. Let's make the S95C a touch brighter by setting the contrast enhancer to low. To get the G3 as bright, we go to Cinema Home, Dynamic Tone Mapping, Expression Enhancer on Detail, and voila, the two TVs are a match for maximum color accuracy with maximum brightness. This is perfect for bright rooms. So at the end, if you take filmmaker mode, right, the most accurate mode of both TVs with static tone mapping here and no dynamic tone mapping on the G3, they look identical. But if you're in a bright room, you want to preserve some of the color accuracy but hit maximum brightness, both TVs look the same. What is different is in between the maximum brightness and accurate, right? Maximum brightness, preserving color accuracy, nearly identical. Filmmaker mode, accurate, nearly identical. In between, you have more subtle control over what you want on the G3. You have settings like expression enhancer, cinema home, filmmaker mode, and you have variations of that enhanced automatic dynamic contrast. But ultimately though, they're very similar. In real content, if you're going vivid and dynamic, the dynamic on the S95C is outrageously dynamic. You saw the neon green frog, and on the G3, it preserves a bit more of that color accuracy even in vivid mode, right? So we're not talking outside of filmmaker mode or color accurate modes. If you're gonna go crazy, then, well, let's go crazy. Let's talk about what if you needed super bright color accuracy out the door. Which TV is for you? Because who would need that maximum brightness? Sports, SDR, that's what we're talking about, right? So you're in a bright room, you're watching sports. Which TV does it? Well, check it out. All three TVs set to their brightest mode, LG G3 on Vivid, the Samsung S95C on Dynamic mode, and the Sony A95K also in Vivid. As we speed through the sports footage, this is the strength of the G3. It appears to be the brightest of the three TVs. Although the S95C is not dim by any means, the G3 is just a touch brighter and definitely my choice for sports watching OLED. Now for the recommendations. Both TVs are excellent, but when would you get the G3 and when the S95C, assuming they're priced the same? Remember, the G3 doesn't have a stand. So if you get the G3 and you need a tabletop stand, well, you could click in my affiliate link below because they have excellent ones from Sanus, or if you buy from Value Electronics, they will include a stand, but remember, it does not have a stand. S95C does. S95C has a One Connect box if that's important to you. Some people don't like it because maybe the cord is too short. KG, I'm looking at you. Other people love it, but that's very personal. Image quality is so similar, but the G3 does have the advantage in sports content in a bright room. It gets just a little bit brighter than the S95C. However, the S95C, in future content where you have color luminances that break 2000 nits, the S95C will be more accurate at those bright nit movie scenes when it arrives. That's not called Spears and Munsell benchmark disc. On the other hand, the S95C color luminance is brighter, preserving all that color saturation at higher nits, but only when the content demands it, and that's not all the content, right? Outside of Spears and Munsell benchmark disc, future movies, the S95C, if it needs to, has the headroom to present that saturation at that high luminance that the G3 cannot do. But if you're just watching Netflix, Prime Video, Blu-ray disc, G3 S95C is going to be identical more often than not. But keep in mind one thing that the S95C still does not do right, and this is for you, Samsung. The BT 2020 color space, not working, it's oversaturated. Keep it on auto, it'll default to DCI-P3, which is fine because most movies are graded with DCI-P3 in mind anyway, and any extra color that's in BT 2020, you're gonna have to know where it is. You're not gonna notice the difference, really. But this is something that the Samsung S95C or all Samsung TVs need to work on, is get that BT 2020 color space working, please. Otherwise, people are buying this QD-OLED thinking they're getting that extra color space when in reality, it's not that accurate. I mean, it's there, but I wouldn't use it. But if I was to bring home a TV for my family, which one would it be? It would be the G3 with a little bit of money set aside for a stand, because I would be putting on a table. But first, it's definitely the low bit rate processor that's a little bit better. Surprise, surprise, the LG G3 beat out both the Samsung S95C and the Sony A95K. Second is it's slightly brighter in sports content, and I have a very bright room. And lastly, I do enjoy all the menu system tweaks that are available to me on the G3. Now, this is very unique to me, right? It's not to say that the S95C is a terrible TV, obviously not, but those three things are the minor differences that I think are important to what I use day to day. But wait, what does the Sony A95L need to do to beat the G3 and the S95C? First, low bitrate content. It needs to do better than the A95K. Second, unleash that brightness that I know it's capable of. The Sony A95L will have a better heatsink than the S95C, or so we think, right? It's supposed to have this dedicated heatsink more than what the S95C has. I want to see it unleashed because right now, the Sony kind of pulls back the brightness just a little bit to give me all the gradient detail, and that's fine. That's what gradation preferred is for. But brightness preferred needs to get a bit brighter while preserving some of that specular detail. Brightness preferred currently is just, it's not good. It is not as good as Samsung's tone mapping active mode. So Sony needs to do that better. And third, the A95L needs to price match the G3 and the S95C. Now, if you want an even deeper dive than this review, check out my live stream on the G3 versus the S95C here, and more OLED reviews over here. Until next time, stop the FOMO.